Hello, it's Mr Veale here, and I'm the head teacher of Atwood Primary Academy, which is situated in Sanderstead in South Croydon. And it is the last week of the autumn term 2020. And as I normally say, where has time gone? My goodness, what a year. And I thought I haven't posted anything to YouTube since our special Atwood Remembers video when we reflected on Remembrance Day. So it's been well over a month now. But I just wanted to say a huge thank you to you all. So I'm speaking to you children and to your parents and to my staff and to the governors, all of the whole school community really of Atwood, because by goodness, it's been a very, very challenging year, hasn't it? But we have made it, and I just wanted to say, a huge thank you. It's been incredibly difficult, but I know that our school has pulled together so well, and despite all the negatives of COVID and the pandemic since March, I think there's been some really, really good things to come out of it. And the main thing is just what a wonderful school community we have here at Atwood. So in this show coming up, it's just really a bits and pieces show. So I'm going to share a Christmas story with you, and I'm going to share some bits and pieces from the week junior. So I hope you enjoy it. And the most important thing, of course, is to have an absolutely wonderful Christmas break when it comes round. And just from me as head teacher, just can't wait to see you all again on Monday the 4th of January. But in the meantime, very much enjoy that break when it comes. Take care, and I'll see you about. I'd like to share a Christmas story with you, and it's from this book here, which is called Star of Wonder, and the one I've chosen is called The Journey of the Three. Once in far-off lands there lived three men who were known for their wisdom. One was Caspar, whose eyes snapped blue from the white skin of his face, and whose hair was fair as the snows on the straw roofs of the northern dwelling place. People who knew Caspar said of him that he was watchful, that his mournful face hid knowledge of secret things. He lived a quiet life, seeing the sun dip only slightly on summer days and enduring the bitterness of other darker days when the sun rose not at all. By day he loved to climb the crunching cliffs of fjords and watch the circling ascent of eagles. And by night he stayed outside when the others lapped themselves in fireside warmth. He watched the stars of the north hang crystals in the bowl of the sky above the tiny towns. The second was Melchior, whose eyes glowed like warm coals from the leathery red skin of his hawk-like face, whose hair was rough and darkened by the savage winds of his steppe home. People knew Melchior said of him that he was watchful, that his fierce face hid knowledge of things beyond the ordinary. He lived a wild life, fishing with bears for salmon in the furious waters or riding fast across the flats. By day he was never still, and by night he counted comets as they blazed across the trackless path of heaven. The third was Balthasar, whose laughing eyes were black as his woolly hair, and whose smile was like 2 rows of sweet corn in the rich earth of his vast farmland. People knew of Balthasar said of him that he was watchful, that his beaming face hid knowledge of things magical and mysterious. He lived a solitary life, herding slow, fat cattle in the deep green wilderness of his southern home. By day he drove the animals to water and pasture, and by night he lit tall fires to frighten away wild beasts that would steal his herd. Then, beside their flickering light, he would marvel at the bright, brilliant stars in nights that fell like cloaks of hot velvet. These three lived far apart. They lived very different lives, yet they shared many important things. For all three knew, in the ways of wise men, that earth and sky were made by no man, but that a Father in God reigned over heaven and earth, and that earth was but the mother of mankind, for men were nothing without the Spirit of God, and all three became very restless. Then it was that all three dreamed one night the strange dream of voice whispered to them in the cold wind, the strong wind, hot wind, that they must make a journey through the world's twisting ways. They must find and follow a star, sharp as a new hammered sword, and at the end of the long journey they would meet a child of man, but a child of God. The voice bade them to take nothing with them but their staff, their sandals, their scrolled maps of heaven and earth, that they might travel swiftly and still be able to track the travelling of the stars as well as their own ways upon the earth below. So Caspar turned his back on the frost-painted north. He trained a grey goose to carry him upon her back through the folds of snowy clouds. He lay between her singing wings for many nights and days, flying ever south and east and following the star. In one thing, and in only one thing, Caspar disobeyed the whisper of the cold wind, for he carried with him a gift of gold dug deep from northern mines by dwarves, gold for a king shining with the light of those northern summer days. So too Melchior threw a tapestry blanket over the back of his shrewd pinto pony, and rode fleet-foot through the dusty ways of the east, galloping ever west and west, following the star. In one thing, and only one thing, Melchior disobeyed the whisper of the strong wind, for he carried with him a flagon of frankincense, fragrance to waft to the high King of Heaven, a sweet savour in the rough places of all those endless eastern steppes. So also Balthazar tamed the king of the beasts, a cruel-clawed lion, to carry him upon his rippling back through the sun-drenched plains and jungleless grasslands, running ever north and east, following the star. In one thing, and in one thing only, Balthazar disobeyed the whisper of the wind, for he carried with him a mazer of myrrh, spiced balm to anoint the dying king, brought from the homeland of his heart. And where were these three wise men travelling? Day and night they journeyed to the place where north met south and where east met west, to a small forgotten land by the people of the earth, a country in the grasp of a foreign power where folk had lost all hope, a country where there was nothing for them to do but shepherd sheep amongst the sparse hillsides and wait for something, someone, very scarce knew who. There, right in the cross of the continents, these three men stood under the steel of the great star and knew they had arrived. The star's bright blade pierced cloud and cold. It blazed upon a crude cave hewn out from solid rock behind an inn, in an unknown village people called the House of Bread. Approaching from the north, the south, the east, they met outside the cave. Each knew the others and why they'd come. Without a word they entered and knelt down below the swinging light of a poor lantern, amongst the stink of animals, where no king should be born but this one. A woman was there, a young woman with a tired face but tranquil eyes, and an old man who bowed and offered them bread and wine to comfort them after their long travelling. Above the cave, the star hung ruthless as a rending sword, fit to break the heart of the quiet woman and her husband. Then these three wise men knew that this was no ordinary child, and that their coming had been right in the eyes of heaven's maker. In turn, they bowed themselves before the outstretched babish fingers of the infant in the straw, those same fingers that had sprinkled stars upon heaven's highways, scattered snow upon the mountains, and planted grass upon the plains. And their wisdom told them that although this was the end of their old lives, it was also a wondrous beginning. I'm just going to share with you a word of the week now, and it is, of course, from this copy of the Week Junior, and it is Advent. So where does Advent come from? Well, many of us are eagerly opening our Advent calendars every morning, and so let's find out. So Advent is the season in the church calendar leading up to Christmas, and it actually comes from the Latin word adventus, meaning arrival, reflecting on the celebration of the birth of Jesus. So there we go, it's Advent. So many of you will know that I absolutely love things like words and where they come from. And I'm always trying to encourage you guys at home to extend your vocabulary. So let's find out what new words have been added this year. So, for the first time, the Oxford English Dictionary has chosen more than one word as its word of the year. So, what is the word of the year? So, every year since 2004, the OED, Oxford English Dictionary, has chosen a word of the year. This is a word or phrase that has increased in popularity and best captures the year's events. And to help them make their decision, a team of lexicographers, people who put together dictionaries, analyse more than 11 billion words collected from daily news reports around the world. By doing this, they could see which words were used most often. Previous words of the year include climate emergency, selfie, and simples. Why couldn't they pick just one this year? Well, it's because of the major events that we have had, such as the coronavirus outbreak, the Black Lives Matter protests, and the US presidential election. So the OED says that one word wasn't enough. Caspar Grothwohl, the president of the Oxford Dictionary, says that he has never witnessed a year in language like the one we've just had. Instead, the OED has released a report called Words of an Unprecedented Year, with different words that have become part of the vocabulary in 2020. These words were split into sections such as COVID-19, politics, social movements, social media, and technology and remote working, which is working from home. So, which words have been selected? By March of this year, coronavirus had become one of the most frequently used nouns in the English language. Other words included COVID-19. In the same category were circuit breaker, lockdown, and support bubbles. In technology and remote working section, the use of remote had risen by more than 300%. Mute and unmute also became more popular because of people communicating via video calls. In social movement section, the Black Lives Matter was one of the most used phrases. Its usage increased after the anti-racism protests took place across the world this year. So there you go. Okay, so this week in history, I'm hoping to zoom in. This lady here is Lady Astor. And actually, very importantly, she was the world's first woman Member of Parliament. So on the 1st of December 1919, American-born Lady Nancy Astor became the first woman to take her seat in the United Kingdom's House of Commons as a Member of Parliament, or MP. She would hold on to her seat in Plymouth, England, for a whopping 26 years, winning 7 elections in a row, before retiring from Parliament in 1945. For 2 years, she was the only woman MP in the House of Commons. In Parliament, Lady Astor's focus was on education, as well as a greater control of the sale of alcohol. So well done. It's this week in history, it's Lady Astor. I know if you're anything like my son, he absolutely loves playing on his Xbox, and I often worry that he spends far too much time on that rather than doing other activities. But I wanted to know, are video games any good for us? And so this one is all about some science and technology. So let's see what I found out. So, a new study by Oxford University scientists shows that playing video games can actually improve people's mental health, the way we think and feel and behave. The research, released just as a new generation of gaming consoles hits the UK shops, goes against claims that gaming is actually bad for people. The Oxford team decided to see what impact video games had on the player's sense of well-being, their feelings of long-term comfort, health and happiness. Researchers worked with Electronic Arts, so that's EA, and Nintendo to send survey questions to 3,274 people who spent between 4 and 5 hours each week playing the games Plants vs Zombies, Battle for Neighbourville, and Animal Crossing New Horizon. Overall, they found that people who spent more time on the games reported a greater positive sense of well-being. The team also found that gamers who were connecting socially with others while playing online were increasingly likely to have more positive sense of well-being than those who actually played alone. This suggests that the mental health benefit could come as much from spending time with their friends while gaming as from the act of gaming itself. On the other hand, the researchers also found signs that people who are struggling with their mental health in the real world might get less of a benefit from gaming, and their mental health could be made even worse. So, the scientist that led the study says it shows that people should not be prevented from playing video games. Play can be an activity that relates positively to people's mental health, and regulating video games could withhold those benefits from players, he said. This is pretty convincing evidence that we shouldn't expect the worst, at least for these kinds of social games. So what that's saying there is obviously there are benefits of playing games, but like I think we're all pretty sensible, and everything in moderation is best, isn't it? So what about the history of video gaming? Well, the earliest video games created to test the power of computers back in the 1950s were often versions of real-world games like noughts and crosses. In 1967, a device known as the Brown Box became the first video game system that connected to a TV. Although it never really took off, it did help inspire further development of home gaming systems, such as the Atari 2600, which heralded a new age of gaming in 1977. In the years that followed, video games reached new heights with the release of several classics, including Space Invaders and Donkey Kong. I noticed that this chap here, Gareth Southgate, has got a new book out, so let's find out all about that. In 1996, I can remember it well, footballer Gareth Southgate missed a penalty for England in a shootout defeat at the European Championships. It was a bitterly painful moment. Yet in 2018, 22 years later, Southgate managed an England team that won a penalty shootout and enjoyed the country's best World Cup since 1990. Now, Southgate is sharing what he's learnt in his book, Anything is Possible, Be Brave, Be Kind, and Follow Your Dreams. Gareth Southgate hopes that the new book will make young readers realise that they're not the only ones who worry about making mistakes, because adults do as well. There's lots of things I've been through that they might think people in high-profile roles just don't experience, he told the Week Junior. But they're not the only ones feeling these things. As a manager, Southgate says he encourages players to use their voice, both off and on the pitch. He has been particularly impressed with England player Marcus Rashford's free school meals campaign this year. I think it's a brilliant example of young people recognising that they can have a voice and make a real difference, he says. Southgate is now preparing for the European Championships next summer. The pressure to come up with new ideas, no matter how unusual, is high. At the 2018 World Cup, he gave his players inflatable unicorns to play with in the pool as they relax between matches. He and his coaches will think hard, although he admits, I don't know how we'll have better unicorns next year.